Everyone, my name is Alexander Fuller. Welcome to the quarterly data quality process for Q2. Just a couple of housekeeping things this afternoon before we get started. Everyone is on mute. I do encourage everyone to use the questions function of GoToWebinar to ask questions as we're going through the presentation. This webinar is going to be recorded and available on our help desk on Wednesday. So we have two help desk articles. Both articles will contain the slides as well as the recording. Okay, so we're going to go through the context today, the missing values, child-only entries, utilization, timeliness, who participates, the report details, the overview of the entire process, the submission piece, accessing and reviewing the data quality report. We're going to go through the EVA reporting and accessing and reviewing the EVA report, resources, and questions and answers if there's time at the end. So I do encourage everybody to just ask questions as we're going through, and I try to answer them in real time because at the end we might not have time to address them. Okay, so context of data quality. So why do we participate in data quality? So the Chicago Continuum of Care utilizes data-informed approaches to coordinate services and resources in its efforts to end homelessness. High-quality data from the Homeless Management Information System, which is HMIS, is essential for measuring progress towards ending or preventing homelessness. The COC relies on all providers, regardless of funding source, to enter accurate, complete, and timely data. This collective effort ensures we have the information needed to make informed decisions as a community. Due to this importance on data and to maintain data quality, providers in HMIS are expected to participate in a quarterly data quality process that addresses data in the following areas. So it's going to be missing values or data issues, data inconsistencies, child-only entries, bed utilization, and timeliness. Again, all projects that participate in HMIS, meaning that you've enrolled at least one client during the time period that we're looking at for data quality, you are required to participate or expected to participate in data quality. So the first thing we're going to go through is the missing values. So when you're running your data quality report, this is going to be the first table you see on the summary page. So the elements that we're looking at for missing values is going to be name, social security number, date of birth, race, ethnicity, gender, veteran status, prior living situation, length of stay in previous place, relationship to head of household, client location, domestic violence, disability, income, non-cash benefits, insurance, and destination. So no more than 5% of clients enrolled in your project may have missing values or data entry errors, including instances where data not collected is selected. So in a lot of the pick lists, you have an option to choose data not collected. It is a valid HUD response, but it does indicate missing data. So although you're choosing a valid response, it's still from HUD's perspective, indicates that the data is missing. When it comes to name, social security number, and date of birth, it's also going to include client doesn't know and client prefers not to answer. So if you choose these answers for name, social security number, date of birth, it is going to be flagged as an error. One thing that I do want you to be mindful of is the required for column. So when you're looking at the summary page, next to the data elements, you'll see required for. It's important to kind of be mindful of what clients each data element is applicable for. So things such as name, social security number is required for all clients. So all clients enrolled in your project should have these values. For things such as veteran status, if you have a enrollment that has a adult and a child, the child doesn't need the veteran status, but the adult has to have it. So just be mindful of the required for column so you make sure you're correcting the right thing. When it comes to destinations, included in the missing values is going to be no exit interview completed and other. So no exit interview completed, again, kind of mimics the data not collected, in which is just missing data. When it comes to other by HUD's definition should only be used in cases where it's already been reviewed with your HUD TA. So if you're ideally when you're choosing a destination, you're supposed to choose something that's best fits the situation of the client from what's available. If you're choosing other, based on HUD's definition, you're supposed to reach out to your HUD TA and confirm that choosing other is appropriate for the situation that the client is in, or the destination. So in most cases, other should never really be used. Are there any questions on missing values before we move forward? Okay, so the next piece of data quality is going to be child-only entries. So there must be 0 child-only entries in your project. A child-only entry is flagged when a client under the age of 18 is enrolled in the project without being connected to a parent or guardian. This can happen for 2 reasons. So it's either going to be due to a child who's entered separately from their parent or guardian. So if a household already exists, you already have the clients enrolled in your project, and a child gets entered into the project, and they don't get connected to the household and the enrollment, and they're just created as a brand new client, brand new enrollment, they're going to show up here because they're not connected to the existing household. So fixing that will remove them from the child-only entries. When it comes to the client's date of birth being missing, so if it's a null value for date of birth, then it kind of just defaults to them being 0, so they show up as a child-only entry as well. In other cases, I've noticed that what happens is that the year that you're putting in for the date of birth is the current year. So it might just be out of habit sometimes where just by mistake you'll put the current year for the client's date of birth, but that can also result as a child-only entry because they'll be under the age of 18. One thing to note is that if your project serves unaccompanied youth, so you're funded to serve clients under the age of 18, then please just reach out to the help desk just so we're aware of it, just so we don't mark your child-only entries as out of compliance. Okay, so for utilization, bed utilization must be within the following ranges. So depending on your project type, if you're an emergency shelter project or a transitional housing project, utilization must be between 80% and 105%. For permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing projects, it must be between 85% or greater. For safe haven projects, it's going to be 85% to 105%. So one thing to note is that emergency shelter projects, transitional housing projects, and safe haven projects, the way utilization is calculated for them is going to be based on the clients that are active as of the point in time date. So the point in time date for this iteration of data quality is May 15th. So any client enrolled in those projects on May 15th is going to be included in data quality. When it comes to permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, those particular projects require that a client has a housing move-in date. So that housing move-in date must be on or before May 15th to be included. So any housing move-in dates that are after May 15th are not going to be included. They might be valid housing move-in dates, they're just not valid for this particular report.
Alex, can you look at your messages real quick, please? Hey, Alex.
Okay, so on the right side of the screen here, you'll see a table, which is going to be the table you'll see in the summary page of the data quality report.
Hey, Alex.
So this particular table is broken out into 2 sections. One is dedicated to bed utilization and the other is dedicated to unit utilization. So no more than, or at least one of the utilizations must be in compliance. So either bay utilization or unit utilization. Okay, just to confirm, is everyone able to hear me and see my screen? Okay, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me know. So yeah, when it comes to utilization, one of the pieces need to be in compliance. So whether that's bay utilization or unit utilization, one of them has to be in compliance. So when it comes to bay utilization, that's going to be the actual individual clients enrolled in your project versus the individual number of beds that your inventory has. So permanent supportive housing projects, again, you need to have a housing moving date for those clients to be counted. But for emergency shelter, transitional housing, safe haven, it's going to be the clients enrolled as of that point in time date. When it comes to the unit utilization, it's going to be your household count versus the unit count. So that's going to be the difference between the two sections. So as long as bed utilization is in compliance, then you're good to go, or unit utilization, then you're good to go. Okay, so the next piece here is still talking about utilization, but this is really looking at the details tab of the data quality report, specifically the housing move-in date column. So this column is intended to assist permanent supportive housing projects and rapid housing projects so that they're able to understand the clients that are actually being counted in utilization. So for emergency shelter, transitional safe haven, it's kind of a little easier to figure out because you have that project start date. But without a housing movement date, it's really hard for permanent supportive housing and rapid housing projects to know which clients are actually being counted. So this column is supposed to help with that. As you're reviewing it, you might run into instances where you might see a null value or date out of range. So what those two things mean is that if you see null, then that just means within the assessment, the client doesn't have a housing moving date added. If you see date out of range, that means one or two things. Either the date that's or the housing moving date that's added is either before the project enrollment date, meaning that the client was housed prior to them enrolling in your project, which in most cases that would indicate an error, or the housing moving date is after the point in time date. So for this iteration of data quality, we're looking at May 15th. So if your client got housed on May 16th, it's a valid housing moving date. You shouldn't make any changes to it. You are going to see date out of range in the report, but that's just because this particular report isn't looking for clients housed after the 15th, just on that exact day. Are there any questions on utilization? Okay. So the last piece is going to be timeliness. Timeliness is tracked through an automated report created by All Chicago. This timeliness report will track the timeliness at entry, exit, housing movement date, and for shelter services. So timeliness measures the time it takes to create an element in HMIS. This measure applies even if the entry date is backdated. For instance, if a client originally came into your project June 1st of 2025, but they were not entered into the project in HMIS until June 4th of 2025, the information will be considered out of compliance as it took 3 days to indicate that the client was enrolled in your project. And timeliness data cannot be corrected. So just one thing to note about this is that, again, like even if you're backdating the enrollment date, that doesn't change the date that it shows in the back end of the system. So for the date added date, that's the same for the entries, the exit, the housing movement dates. So although you see the date, the values in the interface, you'll see those particular dates that you're manually putting in. Those are not the dates that are being used for the timeliness report. Okay, so who participates? So all projects, regardless of funding, are required to participate in the quarterly data quality process, so long as the project is active and has at least one client enrolled. So again, if you have any activity, so if you have a client enrolled during April 1st to the end of June, then you should be participating. If you have any questions on if your project should participate, always reach out to the help desk sooner than later so we can look into your question. But also we do have a article on our help desk which lists all the projects that are currently active in the system, so you can see the projects that we're expecting to participate. And again, if you don't see your project on the list and you think that you should be participating, please let us know. We might have missed your project, or there might be a reason why your particular project isn't included. So if any questions, again, just let us know sooner than later and we can assist with that. So the report details, the reports must be generated for one project at a time. So these reports are in business objects. You're gonna have to run them manually or as scheduled reports. The functionality of the report does allow you to add multiple projects at one time. So let's say you have 3 permanent supportive housing projects and it makes sense for you to just run one report of all the projects to correct the data. That's fine. You can continue to do that. This is speaking more so of what needs to be submitted. So if you're submitting your reports, they have to be individualized per project. So you can't group up the projects for submission. The reports will be looking at the time period between April 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 2025. The point in time date that you're going to see in the interface of the data quality report is going to be May 16th, and that's including, the reason for that is because it's including +1 day. So although it says May 16th, it's actually going to be pulling clients either active or has a housing movement date as of May 15th. Okay, so this is kind of just an overview of the entire process. So the data quality process will go from September 15th today to September 26th. Providers will only be able to submit data quality report, will only need to submit data quality reports when they are ready for final submission. So you don't have to send any interim reports to us, just the final. The business objects reports, which can only be downloaded by users with access to business objects, will cover the following, which is the missing values, child-only entries, and bed utilization. So those are the things you're going to find in the business objects report. And then changes made in HMIS will not generate into business objects until the following day. So this is really important. So if you're correcting your data, and let's say it's the 26th and you're still correcting data, trying to get it corrected, any corrections you make is not going to be available in the report until the following day. So it's always kind of good to try and get all your corrections in by the 25th, so that on the 26th you can run a fresh report with all of the changes. Because we have a question. Would you be able to provide a link to how to run a report? Yeah, so I can send you a link. Also in the emails that we send out about data quality, you can find both of our data quality article links via that email as well. And then the last piece here is going to be timeliness reports. Will be sent to ATAs this week. This report is for your reference. Again, timeliness can't be fixed. If you have questions on timeliness, you can always reach out and we can help explain why it came out that way. But again, there's nothing that we can do to actually change timeliness. Any questions on the overview of the data quality process for this quarter? Okay, so for the submission process, reports are to be submitted by September 26th, which is the deadline. All files must be in Excel format, XLSX format. When you download the report, you are going to have to rename it. It is going by default, is going to be Chicago DQ underscore dash dash underscore year month date. When you're adjusting the name, the dashes should always represent your project ID number. In some cases, if you have a older project where the ID number is only 3 digits, you're going to want to put a 0 in the front because you're always going to want to make sure that you have 4 digits. It's important that the name that you're putting for the report is accurate, just because these reports are, once you email them to us, we do run them through a macro. So it's important that everything lines up as intended. So if you put 3 digits, it's a chance that your report isn't going to go through the process as intended. For the date, so for the year month date, this is going to be the date that you plan on submitting the report. So if you're submitting it on the 26th, it'd be 2026 or 2025 09/26 is what you're going to put for the year month date. Again, it's important to make sure that the file name is correct, because that's how your reports get pulled in for review. Okay, we have one question. How can we get a new ATA access for running reports? So following this webinar, we can follow up with you and get that squared away. So sending in the reports, your data quality reports, it's important that you're going to be sending these reports to dataquality@allchicago.org. If you're sending them any other place, more than likely they're not going to get included in the data quality results. So if you're sending it to the help desk, any member of the HMIS team, it's more than likely not going to make it. So just be sure to submit to dataquality@allchicago.org. The subject line, again, is important just because these emails get filtered based on the subject line. So data quality report submission attachments. Within our data quality article, we also have this covered in one of the sections. If you want to copy and paste the subject line or the email address, that can help with any mistakes with submissions. One thing that I did mention is that when you're submitting the reports, you're going to want to submit an individual report per project that you have. With that said, you can combine all of those individual files into one email. So you don't need to send multiple emails per project or send an individual email per project. You can just send one email with all of the projects that represent your agency. Another important piece is when you're downloading the file from Business Objects, You do have options in which how you can download it. It's always important to make sure that it's an Excel file. If you're downloading PDF files and submitting those will not be accepted. So it has to be an Excel format for it to be included in the results. Okay, so we'll kind of quickly walk through the timeline. So today is the start of the data quality process. Again, the webinar is going to be recorded and we'll have slides available. And then the correction period is going to be between today and the 25th. And that's just because, again, Business Objects takes a day to update. So if you're making any corrections on the 26th, you're not going to be able to submit those corrections on the 26th as well. So try to make sure all of your corrections are done by the 25th. And the 26th is going to be the day of submission. The final results will be posted the following week, more than likely, but we will send out an email letting everyone know when those are available on the help desk. Okay, any questions before we move over to kind of a live example of the data quality report? Okay, hopefully everyone is able to see my screen and service point. Okay, so once you're in HMIS, to access Business Objects, you can find it in two different spots. So at the very top, in the top right corner, you'll see Connect to Business Objects. And it's also located in Reports at the very bottom. So under Custom Reports, you can access it here or at the very top. Once you click on it, it's going to open up a brand new tab. And you're going to come to your home screen here. To access the data quality report, you're going to click on Folders, Public Folder, Chicago Live, Chicago COC Report Secure, and Data Quality. Once you're in the Data Quality folder, you'll be able to access the Chicago DQ underscore dash 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 report. So if you right click on this, you'll be able to schedule this report. So if you click schedule, you'll be able to complete the prompts of the frequency, how you want to receive the report. So if you want a brand new report generated every morning for you to kind of review, you can set that up via schedule. But for this example, we're just going to click on it and kind of go through the prompts. Okay, so when you're running a report, you're going to see these prompts. This is how you're going to be able to configure the report to your particular project or projects if you're including more than one just for, you know, your reviewing purposes. So the first prompt that you have here is to select a provider. So you'll have a long list here of providers. It's easier to kind of just always search for the project ID number or type in the name of the project. For this example, I'm just going to choose our test PSH project. By default, the start date and well, all of the dates are completed for you. So there is no need to make any adjustments to any of the dates. But just for kind of clarification, what all of this means, so is that the start date is going to be the start of the reporting period, which is going to be April 1st. The end date of our reporting period is going to be June 30th, but we're including plus 1 day just to make sure we include all the data up until midnight. we're going to put 7/1, which is July 1st. For the pit date plus 1 day, our pit date this iteration is going to be May 15th. So again, plus 1 day is going to be May 16th. And the effective date. So the effective date you're going to see in a lot of reports. In most cases, these are always set to far into the future, and they should always stay that way if the goal of you running the report is to pull in updated data. So if you make any adjustments to this or you change this to the current day or the day previous, changes that you're making in HMIS, there's a chance that it's not going to show up in the report accurately. So it's always important to have this data out as far as possible, just to make sure you're pulling in the most recent of information. Any questions on completing the prompts? Okay, so while we wait for this, one thing that I do want to show everyone is our HMIS help desk. So a lot of the questions that we receive, we try to make a help desk article surrounding those topics so that we have documentation on it for the next time. So if you have any questions about like your data or how to do certain things in HMIS, it's always best to kind of come to our help desk first and search for those various subjects to see if we have any articles on it. So within our data quality section here, we have the data quality plan. Is always good to kind of review just to see what's required for data quality. The data quality process article, which goes over pretty much everything we covered in this webinar today, but in maybe a little bit more detail. And running the report is also included in this section also. So if you have any questions about scheduling the report, that's going to be in this article as well as how to submit it and the webinar recording once we get that uploaded. And the article here is going to be the projects that we have as operational currently. So review this list to make sure that you know which projects that your agency should be participating. And again, if you have any questions about the list, please reach out and let us know. Okay, so when you run the report, this is what you're going to see. You're going to have these tabs here at the top, A through E. The first tab here is going to be your summary tab. At the very top, you're going to have your data elements. This is where you're going to have those 5% for errors and the particular elements. Again, be mindful of the required for column, just because every element isn't going to be applicable for every client. So it's important to know which clients to work on for what thing. When it comes to the percentages, again, anything over 5% is going to be an error. If you have a project with 100 clients and you have 2 errors, it's going to be under 5%. is not going to show up as being out of compliance. If you have, 10 clients enrolled in your project and 2 have errors, then that's going to be a very high percentage in which you're going to want to fix. In cases where you have kind of a combination of those things, my recommendation is to always fix the things that are out of compliance. So if you have an error that's at 2%, but you also have an error that's at 44%, it's best to spend all of your time focusing on that 44% because that's the only one that's out of compliance. Right underneath this table, you're going to see the child-only entries table. There is a dedicated tab for child-only entries, but this is kind of just a cumulative total of that tab. And right below it is where you're going to see utilization. So again, we have our bid utilization and we have our unit utilization. As long as one is in compliance, then the project as a whole is in compliance for utilization. The next tab here is the details key. So this tab is really just kind of giving you information about the next tab here, which is tab B, client details. So this goes over all of the acronyms we might use within the report and what they mean, what certain values mean, mismatch, HUD verification, dashes. So if you see a dash in the report, that's indicating that it's not applicable for that client. They're either a child or not head of household. So it's always good to kind of review this, especially if you have questions about a particular column within the client details. When it comes to the client details, one thing that I do want to mention is the housing move-in date column. You're going to find it at the very end of the table or the sheet. So this is where you're going to find those housing movement dates. Again, for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, these housing movement dates should be one-to-one with what you see in the summary page. So if they have a housing movement date, permanent supportive housing project, then they should show up in the summary page. This is a test project, so I don't believe it's set up accurately in the back end. So it's probably not set up as a PSH project. That's why it's not showing up here. But ideally, it's going to be one-to-one with what you see in the summary. Child-only entries, again, these are usually occurring due to a missing date of birth or not being connected to an existing household with a client over the age of 18. So in cases like this, if you have missing date of births, you're also going to have missing date of births, or you're also going to have errors for date of birth in the summary tab for the various data elements. So if you have an error for child-only entries and it's due to date of birth, you're also going to see it here. So fixing it is going to fix it for both places. But this just gives you the ability to see the client ID to make those corrections. The next 2 tabs here are going to be your inventory information tabs. So these are just going to be for your information of what your current inventory is for this particular time period. So, let me clarify that a little bit more. So the information that you see here is what's valid for the reporting range. So from April 1st to June 30th. If you've changed your inventory, let's say July 1st to something different, that's not going to show up in this table here. So it's only going to be looking at what your inventory was as of that point in time date for this data quality period. If you made any changes after that point in time date to your inventory, that's not going to be reflected here. The 2 different column or the 2 different tabs that you see here, one is dedicated to rapid rehousing and then one is for all the other projects. So if you're a rapid rehousing project and you're running this report, then this particular tab here will be blank. And when you click on the rapid rehousing tab, then it is going to have a table with the appropriate information. So if you run a rapid rehousing project and you're looking at this tab here for a table, it's not going to be displayed. It's only going to be displayed in the rapid rehousing tab. And the following tab is additional information. So this is just going to give you a count of all the clients that are included in the report and give you a scope of your parameters that were chosen. Are there any questions on the data quality report or how to run it or interpret anything within the report? Okay. Okay, so we're going to move over to EVA reporting. So during this iteration of data quality, we're continuing to encourage providers to not only generate and review the data quality report available in business objects, but to also review their project data using EVA. At this time, EVA reports are not required to submit to AllChicago as part of the data quality process, but will become more integrated into the overall data quality process in the future. So again, based on this data quality period, we're encouraging providers to run an EVA report that mimics the time period for data quality. So that'll be a report from April 1st to June 30th. The main areas of focus that we'd like providers to really look into is overlapping and duplicate enrollments. So if you're running the EVA report from multiple projects at your agency or even the same project, if you have any overlaps, that's going to show in the report. Relationship to head of household, too many head of households, no head of households. So household errors come about quite frequent, actually. So these can happen for quite a bit of reasons, but it's always important to kind of just review and make sure that you have a head of household for every enrollment and that there's not too many head of households. Sometimes if you're enrolling clients that are already existing in HMIS or enrolling households that are already existing, sometimes you might pull in values from previous enrollments where that configuration made sense. But if you don't make the change in this new one, then those values still get pulled in, which might result in, more than one head of household or not having a head of household at all. One thing different with this iteration of DQ is that we are going to send out individual reports to agencies to show overlapping enrollments across agencies. So this is similar to what we usually do every year around the LSA time, in which we'll send out emails of overlapping enrollments across agencies. So this year we're doing it a little bit early and trying to incorporate it into our regular process. So you should see those emails start to come in before the week is out. Okay, so to get started with running a report for EVA, the first thing you're going to want to do is to go to reports. So EVA reports run off of a hashed CSV HMIS file. So you can find that at the very bottom of reports under custom reports, same section as the business objects reports, but you're going to want to click hashed HMIS CSV. So when you get ready to schedule a report, you're going to click start new export. You can name this export anything you like. The entry data type is going to represent what you choose as the type when you create enrollments. So if you're an SSVF project and you get ready to create an enrollment for a client and you choose your project and you choose the type VA, you're going to also want to choose VA when you run this report. If you're a PATH project and you choose PATH as the type for all of your enrollments, you're going to want to choose PATH. In most cases, most projects are always going to choose HUD, but it's important to, if you do have that distinction that you indicated when running the report. This report only allows you to run one project at a time. If there's a need for you to run more than one project at a time, you can reach out to us and we can assist with that. But ideally, the report is going to just run one project at a time. So just as an example, I'm going to choose RPSH project. We're going to run it for the time period of data quality. And you're going to choose run export. So these reports run pretty fast depending on how big your project is. But for the sake of time, I have a report already downloaded. So we can just use that as an example. So once you download the report, well, as an example, once it's done, it'll show up just like this, complete, and you'll have a button here that says download the results. So when you do that, you'll be able to click it and it'll download a CSV file inside of a zip file. In most cases, when you download exported files from HMIS, you don't want to make any adjustments to it. So like if you're running an APR, you never want to open up the zip file before taking that same zip file and uploading it to HUD, because there could be a chance it gets rejected. Same thing for this. You just don't want to open it prior to uploading it to EVA, just to make sure you maintain all of the initial settings tied to it. So once you're on the EVA site, this is what you're going to see. On the left-hand side here, you're going to see upload HMIS CSV export. Once you click on this, you'll be presented with a way to upload the file that you just downloaded. So let's just use this one as an example. It's going to take a second to upload. At the very bottom, you can see kind of a progress bar. Once it's done, you are going to be presented with a successful upload, congratulations message. You can just click OK. You're going to want to go down to access data quality and system level. So under system level, you're going to be able to see all of the errors that are tied to your project. So they're grouped into different categories. So you have your high priority, your general errors, and your warnings. The way that you should think about these is that your high priority errors are the things that you definitely want to fix immediately. So high priority errors are usually viewed as impossibilities in the data. So as an example, no head of household. You know, somebody in your the project needs to be the head of household. It's a requirement that someone has to be the head of household. So these are things where they have to be fixed. General errors, I view them also as having to be fixed. They're a required thing to be fixed, but there could be instances where, you know, some of these things might make sense of why it's displayed that way. Things such as missing length of stay, missing residence prior, these fields should be filled out. Invalid housing moving date, you know, those particular things should be filled out appropriately. More than likely, this is indicating that a housing moving date occurred prior to the project enrollment. So again, high priority general errors are things that you should focus on correcting. Warnings are, you know, things that could potentially be accurate. So if you have a client where they're just unsure of their date of birth, then you can choose client prefers not to answer, client doesn't know, those kind of things, including social security numbers. So we get a lot of questions on social security numbers showing up as errors or missing data. For clients that don't have a social security number, that's intended. So the way that those things are always going to show up, if a client doesn't have a social security number for any reason, they're always going to show up as missing data or in this warning section, and there's no way to kind of get around that. So if you have clients that fall into that category, it's okay that they're in this unknown section here. So this is kind of just an overview from the display. My recommendation is to always download the report. And once you download it, you can open it up and kind of go through it in details. So zoom in a bit. So when you download the report, this is what you're going to see. It's going to have the parameters that you ran the report for. This is an older report that I ran, so the parameters doesn't match this quarter, but if you run it for this particular data quality quarter, those are going to be the dates that you see here. When it comes to system summary tab, this is going to be a cumulative total of all the errors that is present in your data. So if you look at the issues, you can see a long list of all of the issues that's found. This enrollments column is going to give you the cumulative count of all the clients that is affected by that particular error. And the type is just going to tell you the level of concern, I guess, for the error. So organization summary doesn't really come into play unless you're running the report for more than one agency. So since you guys are going to just be running it for your agency only, your organization is going to be the only one in that particular tab. One of the most important tabs I think that's in this report is going to be the guidance tab. This guidance tab is going to give you an explanation on all the errors that's found in your data. So it's not just giving you what the error is and you have to kind of hunt to figure out what that means. Review the guidance tab because it's going to tell you exactly why this is an error or how to fix it or where you can go to make the correction. So the next three tabs are going to be broken out into those particular categories we talked about. So high priority, errors, and warnings. So again, it just breaks it down to what the error is and the personal ID, which is going to be the client ID number. When you download the report, it's going to say personal ID, but it's going to be the client ID number. So you can just copy and paste it right into HMIS to go directly to the client. When it comes to overlapping enrollments, sometimes it's helpful to have this enrollment ID. This enrollment ID, you can't really do anything with in HMIS, so you can't take this ID number and search for it. But just to know that they're separate or they're different enrollments, and then also the household ID is important too, is because sometimes if you have duplicate enrollments that you created by mistake, if each enrollment has a different household tied to it, you could potentially be including different sets of clients. So it's always important to know which household is tied to which enrollment, especially if you're planning to remove one. But again, this column or this tab goes over all the high priority errors that's found in your data. Errors follow the same principle. So you have your client ID, the enrollment ID, household ID, the date of the enrollment, but it's just going to have all of your normal errors. Warnings, again, these are just going to be things that you're going to want to review and see if there's any room to correct or change data. But again, these aren't necessarily errors, but just showing that, you know, something might be wrong with the data that's entered here. The following tab is going to be your overlap enrollments. So this tab is just really good to see in a streamlined view, the overlap in enrollment. So you'll have your client ID number, and you'll be able to see the project that they're enrolled in, the entry date, exit date, and then you'll also be able to see the duplicate project that falls within that overlap. So this is usually a report we send out around the LSA period. We do plan on sending out a earlier iteration, a part of this data quality period. So again, just be on the lookout for that. And again, there's no expectation of you submitting any EVA reports back to All Chicago. This is more so just another tool to give you to be able to ensure that your data is as accurate or as clean as possible. This last tab here, referral details, you can kind of disregard it just because the way that we use referrals is a little bit different than the way that this report pulls them in. So data that you might see here is not gonna be one-to-one of what you might see in HMIS. So the referrals details, you can just disregard this particular tab, but everything else is very good to kind of go through and review. Any questions on EVA before we move on? Okay, so for user resources, again, we have our 2 data quality articles, one that kind of goes over the process and just a high level overview of how the data quality process works. The second article is going to be how to run and interpret the data quality report. So that's going to get into the specifics about the parameters that you're going to choose, as well as various data points within the report. Both articles, again, will have a link to the recorded version of this webinar and the slides. Some other helpful article links that I put here are the sub-assessment and HUD verification articles. So if you have any questions about sub-assessments or HUD verification errors that you're receiving in data quality, it might be worth kind of reviewing this article to see if it solves any of your questions. Documenting the housing moving date. Again, this article is going to help you ensure that the housing moving date is entered appropriately. Make sure it's not before the project start date. Again, when it comes to utilization, the point in time date is the 15th. So if you have a client that's housed after that date and they're not showing up in the report, there's no need to go in and make any changes to the housing moving date. It's just this particular data quality report isn't pulling that client in, and that's okay. And then the following article is relationship to head of household. So again, this just kind of goes through what should be selected, how making sure that everyone in the household has an appropriate relationship status, making sure that there's always at least a client marked as self in every enrollment. So these 3 articles I think are really good to kind of just review. And just lastly is that the user resources, we do have office hours that started on the 8th, last Monday, and they are going to run through the 19th. So Friday being the last day, there isn't going to be any availability for office hours next week. So if you have any questions, please try to schedule time to meet with us so we can work through any of your questions. All of these questions, all of the sessions are going to be via Microsoft Teams. We do ask that an ATA is present on the call or someone with business objects access, just so that we're able to maximize the time that we have available. And then any details about why you're setting up the call prior to the call could help us kind of get ready and kind of, know what the problem is and kind of walk through it a little bit more efficiently. So any information you could give us beforehand is always good also. And thank you for sitting through this long webinar today with me. Sorry that we kind of went over a bit. I am going to stay on for an additional 5 minutes or so. So any questions that you guys have, please just let me know and I'll try to answer them. So we do have a question. What are the dates again to run the report? So the report parameters is going to be from April 1st of 2025 to 7/1 of 2025. So the report itself in business objects is going to run into July 1st, but the actual data that we're measuring is going to stop on June 30th. And then the point in time date is going to be the 15th, but in the report itself is going to be set as the 16th. And if you're running this report in business objects currently, you shouldn't have to make any adjustments to the report. Everything is already set for this particular iteration by default. Okay, so just following this webinar, we'll follow up on your email regarding the new ATA. Okay, so I submitted an inventory update request. When will I know that it was completed so that clients can be entered? So the inventory, so depending on what you submitted the inventory date for, if it's again after the 15th of May, it's not going to show up in this data quality report. It's still going to reflect the inventory as it was previously. Okay, so we have another question. I'm a new ATA for my agency. How do I go about gaining admin access? So you're just going to reach out to the help desk, submit a ticket, and we'll be able to assist. Okay, so we have another question. I checked one of the timeliness issues we had and checked the history for the case manager when they entered the family and it seems correct. Is there a specific place I may check the error? So timeliness is kind of hard for you to be able to see in the system. So the history that you see in questions and assessments by default is going to, or is going to default to whatever date the entry assessment is. So let's say you have an entry assessment on January 1st of 2025, and in March, you decide to go back to the entry assessment and make an adjustment. It's still going to have that January 1st, 2025 date because that's the date that the information on the assessment was accurate. So when you're looking at the history, it's not going to show what the timeliness report is pulling from. I really can't think off the top of my head where you'll be able to see that date added date. Okay, yeah, so that's going to be, if you're checking the UDE questions on the client's entry assessment, those dates that you're seeing in the history is always going to reflect the date of the assessment that it's on, or the assessment that the data was entered on. So that's not going to be the best place to check the actual date that the information was entered into HMIS. I'm going to make a note of this because this might be something we can make available in a business objects report. So you're at least able to see what that date added date is. Okay, we have one more question. The new inventory started on September 6th, so they can enter the singles now. Yes. So when it comes to inventory and project enrollments, you should never halt, putting in project enrollments waiting for an inventory change because the inventory doesn't really affect how the project operates. So if you have clients that you're waiting to put in, you could put them in immediately. You don't have to wait for any changes when it comes to inventory. You're welcome. All right, I think that's all the questions that we were gonna get in. So any additional questions, if you're typing it out now, just please submit it as a help desk ticket and I'll try and get back to everyone as soon as possible. Again, thank you for joining the webinar today and enjoy the rest of your day.